The Dutch Grand Prix was the first event following the summer break. Lewis Hamilton returned totally rejuvenated and renewed, and it appeared in the free practices that he had a lot more faith in his car. But after the race, Lewis felt defeated by mistakes made by the team. So, was the team to blame? And what did Lewis have to say about their decisions? And how could this even happen? By free practice 3, he claimed that he hoped to be competing for a front row start on qualifying day, despite setup adjustments and unpredictable weather conditions. However, things did not go as planned on Saturday. He was blocked on his first lap by Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll. Then after Q1, he was blocked again by Yuki Tsunoda, preventing him from making it out of Q2, forcing him to start the race from 13th place. George Russell qualified in 3rd place. When questioned after the race, Lewis stated that his tyres had overheated after a handful of fast laps, and that he did not have enough time to change them and attempt again. Toto Wolff, on the other hand, was outspoken in his criticism of the drivers who had hampered Lewis during qualifying. Except for Lewis, everyone else started the race on the soft tyres, while he was on mediums. The rain began to fall shortly after the race began, and it was pouring heavily. Mercedes expected the rain to last only a few minutes, so they instructed both of their drivers to keep going. But the rain continued, and they were not brought in soon enough to change their tyres, so they ended up at the rear of the grid. Sergio Perez benefited the most from doing things right, which gave him the lead in the race at that moment. So the objective for Lewis and George was to work their way up the grid, which they accomplished twice, with Lewis getting to 5th and Russell getting to 7th. Lewis was ecstatic to pass Norris for 5th place, having observed that the McLaren was a very quick car. Meanwhile, Perez was hauled in for a pit stop, allowing Verstappen to seize the lead in the race. Later in the race, when Alonso had passed him for 2nd place, Perez crashed into the gravel, following a red flag period induced by heavy rain that forced Zhou Guanyu to crash. The Mexican was given a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane, dropping him to 4th place at the end of the race. Lewis had to revert to 6th place when the race was resumed, since it was his position the lap before the red flag came out. Meanwhile, George's car suffered a puncture after a minor collision with Russell and Norris, forcing him to withdraw. Lewis continued to battle Carlos Sainz, who managed to preserve his P5 until the checkered flag. Verstappen won the race, with Alonso in 2nd place and Gasly in 3rd. It was clear that Mercedes, who had the pace, had held themselves from podium places. In an interview after the race, Lewis criticized the team's failure to stop for wet tyres early, claiming he had strong pace and believed he could have given the leading 2 drivers a fair battle. One thing to note is that Mercedes' pace seemed to be increasing all the time. Even though it didn't end as hoped, Lewis Hamilton described his comeback effort from P13 to P6 in the Dutch Grand Prix as redemption after a terrible qualifying performance. It didn't start off that well, but I'm happy with the drive that I did to get back into the points and get 6th, the Briton said after the race. But it could have been higher for sure, if we made the right decision at the end of the day. I feel like the car was redemption in a sense, that it was terrible yesterday, and I've managed to dial the car in a bit better today. I overtook a bunch of people, and to start 13th, I was dead last at one time, so to get back up to 6th, I'm happy with that. Lewis was battling a visibly slower Carlos Sainz for P5 in the last stages of the race, but was unable to pass him. The tyres were good, just Sainz was slow and it was hard to get past him, but that's racing. When asked if he could have contended for the top 3 spots, Lewis indicated the W14 would have been able to compete with Max Verstappen's Red Bull. It's hard to know. Today I think I had the pace. I was on pace with Max in the race, but we were out of position. I don't know how the car will be on low downforce at the next race at Monza, the Briton concluded. Lewis Hamilton claims that if Mercedes had made the right call during the Dutch Grand Prix, we would have had the pace to challenge the top 2. Lewis Hamilton qualified 13th for the Dutch Grand Prix, however he finished 6th. However, Lewis feels Mercedes' tardy requests for tyre compound modifications in shifting weather conditions have stopped the team from competing for top positions. I feel really good, he said after the race. I didn't really know how I was going to do naturally. And I sat here last night just really racking my brain like, where did we go wrong? How do we end up in this position? Then I was just working on trying to figure out how I can progress. I was the only one on the medium tyre and I wanted to be offset to the people around me, not everyone on the grid. When that rain came out, we as a team made the wrong decision. Ultimately, it was the team's call and we paid the price for that. But then we came out last and I think after that, just was chasing, kept my head down. Lewis then discussed his journey across the field. I was really happy. I got past the McLaren of Lando Norris on this track, which is not so easy to do, and I was quicker than Sainz at the end, just needed to get DRS. I think the pace in those conditions, if we made the right call, we had the pace to be challenging the top 2. We would have been challenging Max, to be honest. Particularly when we got to the dry, I mean, pace-wise, I think we weren't terribly far off. Not saying that we would have beat them, but it's nice to think that way, Hamilton concluded. But it isn't just making the right decisions in the race, as the car needs to be on point as well, which wasn't the case during the weekend. Toto Wolff has outlined some of Mercedes' problems with the W14, claiming that the car is very, very difficult to drive. Mercedes is now second in the constructors' standings, but has only one podium in the previous 5 races. The team started 3rd and 13th in the Dutch Grand Prix with George Russell and Lewis Hamilton. However, a miscalculation with the weather radar caused them to choose the wrong strategy and not pit for intermediates. As the track dried, the team transitioned to slicks, something the team has battled with since the start of last season, owing to inability to create tyre temperature. But Wolff feels the issues weren't confined to those circumstances. "We have issues everywhere," Wolff said. "In the wet, the crossover period, or in the dry, the car is just very, very difficult to drive. It is snappy, it is unpredictable, but if you can put it in the sweet spot in terms of setup, then the car is fast, and we saw that with George Russell qualifying 3rd. But we need to be realistic. We could have had 2nd on the grid, but we need to look at the gap to Max. It is something that we need to close. 7 tenths is 7 tenths. Next to this, he believes the team's judgments at the Dutch Grand Prix were subpar from everyone, including myself, and vows to conduct a thorough investigation. I think we stayed out catastrophically too long," the Austrian said. "We got it completely wrong, and it is annoying because the car had real pace. From there on, it was just recovering as good as we could. I would rather have a fast car and a mediocre result, even though it hurts. It is bittersweet because the result is just really bad. It could have been, but that doesn't count in this sport." When asked if he would personally review the errors, Wolff replied, "We will review thoroughly. The situation is never one person in one department. It is the communication between the driver, the pit wall, strategy, weather, all of us taking decisions. It was subpar from everyone, and that includes me. It's good when it hurts. When it stings, it sticks," he concluded. The Austrian expressed his wish for Mercedes to simply perform better. "Clear variability and unpredictability is what makes the sport exciting," he explained. "You want to look at the telly on Sunday and hope for a fight for the win, and that is just not the case at the moment. It is not happening because one team and one driver is just doing a much better job than anybody else. We need to acknowledge that it's up to us to find solutions that leapfrog us forward to a certain degree, because 7 tenths is not something that you find from one race to another. We have seen it with McLaren. That one update basically changed their performance levels considerably, and the same with Aston Martin over the winter, so it is possible and up to us to get there." Toto Wolff thinks weekends like the one in Zandvoort only fire us up to bounce back even stronger in Mercedes' Italian Grand Prix preparation. "Zandvoort was a frustrating weekend," Wolff said. "There was potential, but we failed to capitalize on it. We got the call wrong with the switch to intermediates, and that put us on the back foot. From there, it was about trying to salvage what we could. Both drivers recovered well, but the final sting in the tail was the puncture for George. The missed opportunities are annoying, but weekends like this only fire us up to bounce back even stronger. We've got plenty of learnings to take into the next race. Fortunately, we don't have long to wait for it. Monza's track characteristics are the complete opposite to Zandvoort, so we'll see how we get on. It's also sure to be another spectacular atmosphere this weekend," the Austrian concluded. So will Mercedes regain their confidence in Monza? And will they be able to put their bad decisions behind them and fight for a podium place? Let us know in the comments down below.